What if I told you that the most toxic person in your life isn't the obvious narcissist or the dramatic manipulator? It's the one who seems completely convinced that you're the problem. I'm talking about shadow projectors, and according to Carl Jung, they're the most psychologically dangerous people you'll ever encounter because they don't even know they're destroying you. Here's what's absolutely terrifying about shadow projection psychology. These people will look you dead in the eye and accuse you of being exactly what they are, with such genuine conviction that you'll start questioning your own sanity. The chronically dishonest person who constantly calls you a liar. The rage-filled individual who's always telling you to control your anger. The manipulative person who swears you're the one being manipulative. Sound familiar? Real talk. You've probably been the victim of psychological projection more times than you realize, and it's been messing with your head in ways you never understood. That person who somehow makes every conversation about your flaws while remaining blameless. That's not coincidence, that's unconscious shadow behavior, and it's one of the most insidious forms of psychological manipulation Jung ever identified. But here's the deal, and this is why you need to hit that like button and subscribe to support this channel. Once you understand how shadow projectors operate, you become immune to their toxic projection patterns. By the end of this video, you'll not only spot them instantly, but you'll have the psychological tools to protect yourself and break free from their projection cycles. We're diving deep into Carl Jung's shadow work today, so grab your coffee and get ready to reclaim your psychological freedom. Because what you're about to learn could literally save your sanity and change how you see every difficult relationship in your life. Here's the deal: shadow projection. Psychology isn't just some abstract concept Carl Jung dreamed up in his study. It's the most insidious form of psychological manipulation you'll ever encounter, and it's happening around you every single day. Think of your shadow as everything you hate, fear, or refuse to accept about yourself: your anger, your selfishness, your insecurities, your capacity for cruelty. Now imagine someone who's so terrified of facing these dark parts that they unconsciously throw them onto everyone else like psychological garbage. When someone's engaging in shadow projection, they're literally seeing their own darkness reflected in you instead of looking in the mirror. It's like they're wearing psychological sunglasses that make everyone else look like the villain while they remain the innocent victim. Carl Jung's shadow work teaches us that this isn't a conscious choice. These people genuinely believe what they're projecting. The dishonest person who constantly accuses others of lying isn't putting on an act. They're unconsciously dumping their own dishonesty onto you because facing it themselves would shatter their self-image. The scary part about this toxic projection pattern is how it creates an alternate reality where you become responsible for their psychological baggage. You'll find yourself defending actions you never took, explaining motivations you never had, and somehow always being the problem in every situation. It's like being trapped in someone else's psychological horror movie where you're cast as the monster, but you never auditioned for the role. Your emotional intelligence gets hijacked because you're too busy defending yourself to recognize the projection defense mechanism at work. Real talk: shadow projectors don't just blame you for things. They make you feel like their accusations must be true. That's the power of unconscious shadow behavior. It comes with such conviction that you start questioning your own reality. They'll look you dead in the eye and tell you that you're the angry one while they're screaming, or that you're being manipulative while they're twisting every word you say. Bottom line, understanding what shadow projection actually is becomes your first line of defense against this psychological gaslighting. But knowing what it is isn't enough. You need to understand exactly how these people operate. Shadow projectors aren't born overnight. They're created through years of avoiding their own psychological mirror. Here's how you can spot one. They've got an uncanny ability to find fault with everyone around them while somehow remaining blameless in every situation. It's like they've got a psychological radar that's constantly scanning for flaws in others while having a massive blind spot when it comes to their own behavior. Carl Jung's shadow work shows us that these people have unconsciously split their psyche. They've banished their unacceptable traits to the shadow realm and now see them everywhere but within themselves. The anatomy of a shadow projector is fascinating and terrifying. They operate from what Jung called unconscious compensation. Whatever they refuse to acknowledge in themselves gets amplified in their perception of others. The person who can't handle criticism will constantly criticize others. The one who's deeply insecure will accuse everyone else of being needy or attention-seeking. They've become psychological projection machines, constantly broadcasting their inner conflicts onto their environment. It's like they're carrying around a broken movie projector that shows their shadow on everyone else's screen. You'll recognize shadow projectors by their predictable patterns. They're always the victim in their stories, never the villain. They've got an explanation for everything that absolves them of responsibility, while making others the problem. This isn't conscious manipulation, it's unconscious shadow behavior that's become their default operating system. Their psychological projection has become so automatic that they genuinely can't see their own role in the problems they create. Here's what makes them so dangerous. Shadow projectors are incredibly convincing because they believe their own projections. They're not lying to you, they're lying to themselves, and that makes their accusations feel authentic and emotionally charged. Bottom line, they've mastered the art of making their psychological garbage your responsibility. But the projection game gets even more complex when you understand that there are actually several different types of shadow projection happening. Real talk, not all shadow projection psychology operates the same way. Jung identified several distinct patterns of how people dump their psychological shadow onto others, and understanding these toxic projection patterns could save your sanity. First, there's attribution projection, where they literally attribute their own motives to your actions. They assume you're lying because they lie, manipulating because they manipulate, or being selfish because they can't face their own selfishness. It's like they've got a psychological copyright on negative traits, and they're constantly seeing intellectual property theft everywhere. Second, you've got complementary projection, the most twisted type where they project the opposite of what they are. The deeply insecure person becomes the arrogant know-it-all who constantly puts others down for being insecure. The emotionally unstable person becomes the one who's always telling others to calm down or get your emotions under control. This projection defense mechanism is particularly dangerous because it's harder to spot. They're not showing you their shadow directly, they're performing the opposite while making you carry the dark side. Then there's scapegoat projection, where one person becomes the designated carrier of all the shadow material for a group or relationship. You become the angry one, the difficult one, the problem person, while everyone else gets to feel psychologically clean. Carl Jung's shadow work reveals that families and organizations often unconsciously choose someone to carry their collective shadow, making that person the identified patient, while the real dysfunction stays hidden. It's psychological dumping on an industrial scale. The fourth type is moral projection, where they project their unacceptable impulses onto you and then get to feel morally superior by condemning you for having them. They'll accuse you of being judgmental, while being incredibly judgmental themselves, or call you selfish, while their entire worldview revolves around their own needs. The fifth and most dangerous is identity projection, where they make you into the person they fear becoming. Bottom line, understanding these 5 types helps you recognize when someone's making you their psychological garbage dump. But why are shadow projectors so damn convincing in the first place? Here's what makes shadow projectors absolutely terrifying. They don't feel like they're lying because, in their psychological reality, they're not. When someone's engaging in unconscious shadow behavior, their brain has literally reorganized reality to protect their ego from unbearable truths about themselves. It's like they're living in a psychological witness protection program where their shadow has been given a new identity: yours. Carl Jung's psychology teaches us that this isn't conscious deception, it's unconscious self-preservation at your expense. The reason their accusations feel so emotionally charged and authentic is because they're fueled by genuine psychological energy, just misdirected energy. When a shadow projector accuses you of being manipulative, they're feeling the real emotional intensity of their own manipulative impulses, but their psyche has rerouted that energy to focus on you instead of themselves. It's like having a smoke detector that's gone haywire. It's detecting real smoke, but it's pointing to the wrong fire. Their emotional conviction makes their psychological projection incredibly persuasive, especially to people who aren't familiar with shadow work. Shadow projectors are also convincing because they often contain a grain of truth, but it's their truth, not yours. When they accuse you of being angry, they might be picking up on some frustration you actually feel, but they're amplifying it and making it about character rather than situation. They'll take your momentary irritation and turn it into evidence that you're an angry person, conveniently ignoring their own chronic rage issues. This projection defense mechanism allows them to acknowledge difficult emotions without taking responsibility for them. Real talk, shadow projectors become master psychologists by necessity. They've unconsciously studied human behavior to find the perfect places to dump their shadow material. They know exactly which buttons to push and which truths to twist. Bottom line, their convincing nature comes from genuine psychological skill, applied in the service of unconscious avoidance. But here's where it gets even more twisted. They don't just project once and move on. Welcome to the psychological hamster wheel from hell, the projection cycle. Once a shadow projector has identified you as their designated shadow carrier, they'll trap you in an endless loop that's designed to confirm their projections while keeping their own shadow safely hidden. Here's how this toxic projection pattern works. They project their shadow onto you, you naturally defend yourself, and your defense becomes proof that their projection was accurate. It's like being accused of stealing while holding someone else's wallet. The more you protest, the guiltier you look. The cycle starts with the initial projection. Let's say they accuse you of being too sensitive. You naturally want to defend yourself, so you explain that you're not overly sensitive, just responding normally to their inappropriate behavior. But here's the trap. Your explanation gets interpreted as defensiveness, which they use as evidence that you really are too sensitive. Carl Jung's shadow work shows us that this cycle is designed to be unbreakable because the projector unconsciously needs you to carry their shadow material. Your protests threaten their psychological defense system. Phase 2 of the projection cycle involves escalation. When you don't immediately accept their projection, they'll double down with more intensity. If you don't admit to being too sensitive, you become defensive and too sensitive. If you try to set boundaries, you become controlling and too sensitive. Every response you make gets fed back into their projection machine and comes out as more evidence against you. It's like arguing with someone who's decided you're guilty and interprets everything you say as a confession. The most insidious part about this cycle is how it makes you start questioning your own reality. After enough rounds of projection and defense, you'll catch yourself wondering, maybe I am too sensitive. That's exactly where they want you, doubting your own perceptions and accepting their version of reality. Real talk. The projection cycle is designed to break down your psychological defenses and make you complicit in carrying their shadow. Bottom line, recognizing this cycle is crucial because once you're trapped in it, escape requires a completely different strategy than what your instincts tell you to do. Here's the deal. You can't break free from shadow projectors using logic, evidence, or emotional appeals because you're not dealing with a rational problem. You're dealing with an unconscious psychological defense system that's literally designed to avoid reality. The first step in protecting yourself is understanding that their projections aren't really about you, they're about them. When someone's engaging in psychological projection, they're essentially having a conversation with their own shadow while using your body as a ventriloquist dummy. Carl Jung's shadow work teaches us that the best defense is refusing to play their psychological game. The most powerful tool in your arsenal is what Jung called non-identification. Instead of defending yourself against their projections, you simply refuse to accept ownership of their shadow material. When they say you're too angry, you might say, I can see you're dealing with some intense emotions right now. You're essentially handing their projection back to them without accepting delivery. This projection defense mechanism disrupts their unconscious pattern of making you responsible for their psychological garbage. Boundary setting with shadow projectors requires a completely different approach than normal boundary setting. You can't negotiate with someone's unconscious, so you have to focus on behaviors rather than trying to change their perceptions. Instead of saying, "Stop accusing me of things I didn't do," you might say, "I'm not available for conversations that involve accusations." You're not trying to convince them they're wrong, you're simply removing yourself from their projection field. Real talk, this isn't about winning an argument, it's about protecting your psychological space. The advanced strategy is what I call psychological aikido, using their projection energy against itself. When they accuse you of being manipulative, you might respond with, "It sounds like you're feeling manipulated. That must be really difficult." You're not accepting the projection, but you're also not fighting it directly. You're redirecting their shadow material back toward them in a way that invites self-reflection rather than defensiveness. Bottom line, breaking free from shadow projectors isn't about proving them wrong. It's about refusing to be their psychological dumping ground. But here's something most people don't realize. You might have your own shadow projection tendencies that need attention. Real talk, before you get too comfortable pointing fingers at shadow projectors, you need to do some honest self-examination. Carl Jung's psychology teaches us that we all have shadow material, and we all have the capacity for psychological projection under the right circumstances. The difference between healthy people and chronic shadow projectors isn't the presence of shadow, it's the willingness to face it, own it, and integrate it consciously. If you're not doing your own shadow work, you might be unconsciously projecting your darkness onto others without even realizing it. Here's how to check yourself for unconscious shadow behavior. Pay attention to the traits that trigger you most intensely in other people. Jung believed that what we hate most in others is often what we're unconsciously carrying in our own shadow. If someone's arrogance makes your blood boil, there might be some unacknowledged arrogance in your own shadow that needs attention. If you find yourself constantly irritated by dramatic people, you might be projecting your own unexpressed emotional intensity onto them. This isn't about blame, it's about conscious integration. The practice of shadow work involves owning your psychological darkness instead of dumping it on others. When you catch yourself thinking, "They're so selfish," pause and ask yourself, "Where am I being selfish that I'm not acknowledging?" When you notice yourself getting triggered by someone's behavior, use it as a mirror to examine your own shadow material. This projection defense mechanism works in reverse. Instead of seeing your shadow in others, you're using others as a mirror to see your shadow more clearly. Carl Jung's shadow work isn't just about protecting yourself from projectors. It's about becoming a more integrated, authentic human being. The goal isn't to eliminate your shadow, that's impossible and dangerous. The goal is to develop a conscious relationship with your darkness, so you're not unconsciously projecting it onto others. When you own your capacity for anger, manipulation, selfishness, or whatever else lives in your shadow, you stop needing to see it in everyone else. You become immune to other people's projections because you're no longer carrying unconscious material that can be triggered. Bottom line, doing your own shadow work is the ultimate protection against shadow projectors, because you're no longer an unconscious target for their psychological dumping. The journey to psychological freedom starts with the courage to face your own darkness. So there you have it, the complete blueprint for understanding, recognizing, and protecting yourself from shadow projectors. But here's the million-dollar question. Now that you know how psychological projection really works, what are you going to do when someone tries to dump their shadow on you tomorrow? Because let's be brutally honest, awareness without action is just intellectual entertainment. You can understand every aspect of Carl Jung's shadow work, but if you don't start implementing these protection strategies and setting real boundaries, you'll still end up being someone's psychological dumping ground. Here's what I want you to do right now. Think about that person in your life who always seems to find fault with you while remaining blameless themselves. Ask yourself, which of their accusations might actually be their own shadow material they're projecting onto you? Real talk, this realization is gonna hit different once you see the pattern. But here's the most important part. Start doing your own shadow work. Because the best defense against projection isn't just recognizing it in others. It's owning your own darkness so you stop being an unconscious target for their psychological garbage. If this video opened your eyes to the reality of shadow projection psychology, here's what I need you to do. Smash that like button because it tells YouTube this content matters and helps us reach more people who desperately need to break free from toxic projection patterns. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're building a community of psychologically aware individuals who refuse to carry other people's shadow material. And here's something special. Our next video dives deep into emotional vampires, the second most dangerous type from Jung's list. These people don't just project their shadow, they literally feed off your energy. Make sure you're subscribed because you won't want to miss that breakdown. Share this video with someone who's been trapped in a projection cycle. Your share could be the wake-up call they need to finally see what's really happening in their toxic relationship. Drop a comment and tell us, which type of shadow projection hit closest to home? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to break free from their psychological prison. Remember, knowledge is power, but only when you use it. Your psychological freedom starts with the courage to face the truth, both about others and about yourself.